Hey everyone, did you know that over 90% of you watching right now haven't hit that subscribe button? If you enjoy our content, take a second to subscribe. It's free and it really helps us keep bringing you great stories every day. I used to believe that love was a shelter, something that wrapped around you like a warm blanket. When the world got cold for years, I thought I had found that shelter in Emily. She was bright, warm-hearted, and so convincingly sincere that I gave her everything I had emotionally, financially, spiritually. When we married 3 years ago, I knew she came with baggage. A teenage daughter named Chloe, and her aging mother Linda, who needed help. But I didn't flinch. I took it all on. I worked overtime, took freelance jobs on the side, and skipped vacations just to keep the household comfortable. And now, as Emily carried our first child together, I thought things were finally falling into place, but I was wrong. So deeply, disturbingly wrong. It all started with a door that wasn't quite shut. One Friday evening, I came home early from work. The office power had gone out and they sent us home around 3 o'clock. I didn't tell Emily because I thought I'd surprise her with her favorite Thai food and maybe rub her feet something sweet. I parked a few houses down to avoid detection and crept in quietly. Food in hand, smiling like a fool. I didn't expect anyone to be home, but I heard voices drifting from the living room. The door was cracked open just enough, and what I heard changed everything. I don't know how much longer I can pretend. Emily said, her voice low and bored. He keeps talking to my belly like he's some devoted husband in a movie. It's pathetic. Chloe snorted. He is pathetic. I don't get how you can stand him, always fussing over bills and coupons like a loser. Then Linda's voice chimed in. Keep playing the game, sweetheart. Let him think he's the hero once that baby's born. We'll have even more leverage courts. Love mothers, especially with infants. Leverage, that word hit me like a hammer. I dropped the takeout bag. Didn't even make a loud noise, but it was enough. The room went silent, and a moment later, Emily rushed out. Oh, you're home early. I stared at them, at the woman I loved, the daughter I tried to guide, the mother-in-law I helped pay medical bills for. They all looked startled, but not guilty. That's what scared me the most. I had a short day. I muttered, trying to steady my voice. Brought dinner. I handed the bag to Emily, who took it. Like nothing had happened. She even kissed my cheek. I'll set the table. Not one of them mentioned the conversation, not even an attempt to cover it up. And I didn't confront them. Not yet, because something in me told me that what I overheard was only the surface of something much deeper that night. I barely slept. I lay beside Emily watching her sleep as her hand rested gently on her swollen belly. I wondered if that child, our child, was even mine. The thought disgusted me, but it wouldn't go away. The warmth I once felt for her had turned cold, replaced by an ache I couldn't ignore. The next day, I began my quiet investigation. I knew better than to accuse anyone without proof. I started by checking our shared laptop. Emily wasn't careless. Most of her activity was wiped clean. But then I remembered her old tablet. She hadn't used it in months. I found it at the bottom of a drawer in our room. It was still logged into her backup email. The messages I found were sickening. There were emails to someone saved under the name Jay, talking about how she felt trapped, how she couldn't stand playing the perfect wife anymore. She talked about how once the baby was here, she'd make her move and ensure the house, the car, and the monthly check. It was written with surgical coldness, like I was a business strategy, not a person. One message hit hardest. He doesn't know yet, but the baby's yours, you won. He'll be out of the picture soon. Promise. That line played in my head for days. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her out. Expose her for everything, but I knew she'd twist it. She had her mother, her daughter, and a way with words that always made me feel like the crazy one. And if she really was planning legal action after the baby, I had to think smart. So I started gathering evidence quietly. I took photos of the emails, printed them at work. I installed a discreet camera in the living room, where most of their conversations happened. I told Emily I wanted to start documenting the baby's progress, a little family archive, and she believed me. Why wouldn't she? I was still playing the role of the fool. The footage began to reveal even more Emily would call Jay when she thought I was at work. They spoke in code, but the intent was always there. Promises, plans. Once I even saw her hold her phone over her belly and say hi to daddy. Every time I watched these videos, a part of me died. I started looking at her differently. Every smile, every hug, it all felt staged. I began distancing myself emotionally. First, I stopped bringing her gifts. I stopped asking how she felt. I started making notes, dates, times, comments. I needed everything. And I began protecting myself. Quietly moved funds into a private account. Took screenshots of financial transactions, showing how much I'd spent on her family over the years. I even recorded conversations, mundane ones, but enough to establish a pattern of behavior. My lawyer friend Marcus advised me discreetly don't explode. Yet he said, wait, let her bury herself. So I waited one evening while Emily was out and Chloe was in her room. I sat down with Linda, just the two of us. She was drinking tea, watching one of those reality shows she liked. I asked her plainly, do you think Emily's happy with me? She gave a half smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. She's content, that's more than most get. It wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. You think the baby will look like me? I asked. She looked at me long and hard. Does it matter? That was her answer. Days turned into weeks. I grew colder. Less engaged, Emily noticed. Of course you've been distant, she said one morning as she got ready for a prenatal appointment. Just tired, I replied. She kissed my cheek again. Only a few more weeks now, I nodded. But I wasn't thinking about the baby anymore. I was thinking about the storm. Coming after the day she went into labor, I was calm, robotic even. I drove her to the hospital, held her hand, told her she was doing great, but inside I was already gone. I watched as she cried, holding the baby, our baby, and I wondered if that moment was real for her or just another performance back home. While she rested, I looked at the child's face. There was a softness in his features too early to say who he resembled, but I held him anyway because if I was going to confront her, I had to know I'd done everything right, that I hadn't lashed out in anger, that I had given her every chance to be decent. The plan was already in motion. I had enough proof. I had already contacted a lawyer and arranged a private paternity test. But the confrontation, what would come next, would be the hardest part. Because when you love someone so deeply, betrayal doesn't feel like a clean cut. It feels like drowning. Slowly, silently, and I was almost out of breath. I didn't sleep the night we brought the baby home while Emily rested in our room, exhausted from labor, and her mother stayed in the guest room, fussing over baby clothes. I sat in the nursery rocking back and forth in the glider chair I'd assembled with my own hands. The little boy was swaddled in my arms, sleeping soundly. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, the tiny twitch of his fingers, and yet I felt nothing. Not because he wasn't beautiful. He was not because I wasn't capable of love. I was, but because I didn't know if he was mine. I had held on to hope in the early months that hope had been crushed bit by bit until all I had left was suspicion and grief, disguised as caution. The paternity test kit had arrived the day before Emily went into labor. I hid it under the bathroom sink behind a stack of towels. I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to reduce a moment like this to science and swabs, but when someone builds their love on lies, science becomes the only truth you can trust. I gently placed the baby into his crib. He didn't stir. I stared at him for a moment longer, then walked out of the nursery and into the hallway, where a soft, yellow light from the bathroom spilled onto the hardwood floor. I glanced at the closed doors, Emily's, Chloe's, Linda's, and then crept into the bathroom with trembling fingers. I took the kid out, swabbing an infant's cheek. It is easier than you'd think. They don't resist. They don't judge. I sealed the samples, labeled them, and placed the package in my briefcase. I'd drop it off first thing in the morning. By the time the sun rose, Emily was already awake, bustling in the kitchen, smiling as if everything was perfect. She looked radiant. No one would ever suspect the kind of woman she was. Behind that carefully rehearsed exterior, "Sleep okay?" she asked, pouring me a cup of coffee. "I managed," I replied. Watching her closely, she kissed my forehead, then rubbed her belly out of habit, before remembering the baby was no longer inside her. "He looks like you, maybe." She tilted her head. Reading my face, "You all right?" I nodded. "Just tired. Long night, that was the thing about lies. They could only hold if the other person was willing to pretend." And I had pretended long enough. A few days passed. The baby cried through the nights, and Emily acted like a doting mother by day. Linda was constantly around offering unsolicited advice, as if she were the queen of the household. Chloe barely acknowledged me. She was on her phone most of the time, slinking around like she owned the place. Rolling her eyes at anything I said, I no longer tried to connect with her. The warmth I had tried to build with her over the years had vanished like vapor. The footage from the living room camera kept collecting. I checked it during my lunch breaks at work. That's how I caught Emily FaceTiming Jay again, holding the baby in her arms like a trophy. He's healthy, strong. No, I haven't told him yet. He's still playing the good dad. Jay's voice came through, distorted, but clear enough. As soon as you file, I'll be there. You know that Emily laughed. I'm not rushing anything. Let him keep paying for everything. Might as well let him dig his own grave. I had to pause the video. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. It wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. I was a joke to her, and she didn't even try to hide it. When I wasn't around, the test results came in 3 days later. I opened the envelope in my car, parked 2 blocks from my office. It was cloudy that day. I remember because the clouds mirrored how I felt. Heavy, ready to burst. The results were final. The child was not mine. I stared at that line over and over, expecting it to change. It didn't. I sat in the car for almost an hour, the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was deeper, a kind of sorrow that no words could touch. A sadness that wrapped around my chest and made it hard to breathe. But now I had clarity. I went home that evening and kissed my wife's forehead, just like always. I played with the baby. I even complimented the dinner Linda cooked, acted like everything was normal. Because if they were going to treat me like a fool, I wanted to let them believe I was still playing that role. But behind the scenes, I met with Marcus, my lawyer friend. Again, he had everything I needed: documentation, evidence, witness statements. The video logs. We began drafting a plan. I couldn't just walk away without making sure they couldn't touch me again. I wanted to protect myself, legally, emotionally. It was too late. Marcus looked over the files and whistled. You've got enough to paint a very clear picture, but you've got to keep playing your part until the papers are ready. If she thinks you're pulling away, she might try to flip the narrative, so I did. I bought flowers. I cooped over the baby. I nodded along when Linda suggested we refinance the house to add her name to the deed. That's when I knew they were getting bold. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I would keep paying, keep providing, keep loving without question. But what they didn't know was that I had already filed a legal separation. Quietly, strategically, the court date was set. The evidence was ready, and when the time came, it would all be laid bare. But the hardest part was the waiting. One afternoon, I came home early again. The house was quiet, unusually so. Emily and Linda were gone grocery shopping, according to the text Emily had sent me. Chloe was home, though I heard her in her room talking on speakerphone. I didn't mean to listen. I wasn't looking for more pain. But what I heard left a mark. I swear once my mom's done with him, we'll have the house. He's dumb, but he's got money. That's all that matters. I leaned against the wall outside her door. Stunned, she wasn't even hiding her disdain. Then she said something that turned my stomach. I don't care if he finds out he's just the wallet. He doesn't matter. I left before she could notice me. I drove to the lake nearby, parked and sat in silence for hours. That night, I couldn't look at any of them. I sat at the dinner table, their voices buzzing around me like static, and stared into my plate. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Emily reached over and touched my hand. You've been quiet lately? Everything okay? I forced a smile, just tired. She nodded, satisfied with the lie, but I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of living in a house built on deceit. The court date was a week away. Everything was in place. Financial records, messages, videos, paternity tests. My lawyer would handle the filing. The restraining order if needed, the motion to vacate non-biological parental responsibility. But before the legal battle began, I needed to have one moment of truth. I needed to look her in the eye and ask the question that had haunted me for months. Why not to guilt her not to fix things? Just to hear her say it. To finally strip away the last illusion the confrontation was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be quiet the night before our court date. I couldn't sleep. I'd lay in bed next to Emily, who snorted softly with her back turned toward me, her hand resting near the edge of the baby monitor. The soft hum of the nightlight in the hallway buzzed faintly under the quiet, and outside the wind brushed against the windows in restless patterns like the thoughts clawing at the back of my mind. I got up and walked down the hallway barefoot, careful not to wake anyone. The house felt colder now, not physically, emotionally, like the warmth had slowly drained away over the years until nothing was left but the shell of what once was a family. I stepped into the nursery watching the baby sleep peacefully. He looked so content, so unaware of the world he'd been born into. I stood there for a long time, my hands gripping the railing of the crib. I wanted to be angry at him, but how could I be? He was just a baby. He didn't ask for this. Life didn't choose his parents or the lies wrapped around his birth. He was innocent. Maybe the only innocent one in this house when morning came. Emily was unusually cheerful. She made breakfast, humming. As she cooked while Linda scrolled through her tablet at the kitchen island, Chloe walked in late yawning, grabbing a piece of toast without saying a word. I watched all three of them, a family bound by shared convenience and deceit, and felt like I was watching a play. I no longer had a role in. Emily turned to me as I adjusted my tie. "Big meeting today," I nodded. "Something like that." "You've been dressing up more lately," she said, coming over to fix the collar of my shirt, trying to impress the new boss. "No," I said quietly, just making sure I leave a good impression. She laughed, completely unaware. I picked up my briefcase, looked at them one last time, and walked out the door at the courthouse. Marcus was already waiting. He handed me the finalized paperwork and walked me through what to expect. Everything was ready: paternity results, recorded conversations, bank records, and even witness statements from neighbors who had seen Jay's car parked outside late at night when I was working overtime. "You sure you want to go through with this today?" Marcus asked, studying my expression. "Yes," I replied. It's time that afternoon I returned home early. Emily wasn't expecting me. She'd taken the baby to Linda's for what she claimed was a routine visit. I knew better. I tracked her car's location through the family app on her phone. She wasn't at Linda's. She was at Jay's. I waited in the living room, watching the clock, rehearsing everything I wanted to say. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want drama. I wanted truth. One final raw conversation before it all came apart. When the front door opened around 5:30 p.m., she walked in with the baby in one arm and her purse in the other. She looked surprised to see me. "You're home early." I stood slowly. "We need to talk." She shifted uneasily. "Okay." I nodded toward the couch. "Sit down." She placed the baby in the bassinet and took a seat, brushing her hair behind her ear. "What's going on?" I sat across from her. Pulling the envelope from my briefcase, I slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked, already wary. "Paternity test results." Her face paled slightly. You tested the baby?" I didn't answer. She stared at the envelope, then back at me. "You had no right. I had every right." I cut in my voice, steady, especially when I found out you'd been seeing Jay behind my back. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "You lied to me about everything about him. About the baby, about what I meant to you." Emily's face twisted with defensiveness. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I asked, leaning forward. "Tell me, because from where I stand it looks like you used me, all of you. Your mother, your daughter, you all saw me as a means to an end." Her voice cracked. "That's not true. I heard you. I heard you on video calls laughing with him, talking about how I was a placeholder, a bank account, that you were just waiting for the right time to leave." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean those things. I was just angry or confused. You were calculated. I interrupted you, strung me along while planning a life with someone else." Emily stood, her face red. "So what now? You want to leave me, abandon your family?" I stood too. This was never my family. "Emily, not really. It was a performance, and I was the only one who thought it was real." She covered her mouth, shaking her head. I made mistakes. You didn't make a mistake. I said you made a choice over and over again. At that moment, Chloe walked into the room, earbuds and stopping short when she saw us. What's going on? She asked, her voice flat. Pack your things. I told her. All of you have until the end of the week. Emily's eyes widened. You're kicking us out. I've already filed the paperwork. I said, you'll be served tomorrow. You can contest it if you want, but everything is documented. I won't be responsible for a child that's not mine, and you won't be able to touch another cent of my income after this month. Chloe scoffed. You're such a coward. I said, turning to her, I'm finally standing up for myself. The days that followed were tense, to say the least. Linda came over and screamed at me for hours, calling me every name in the book. Emily begged, cried, made promises she should have made months ago. Chloe stayed locked in her room, slamming doors and blaming everyone but herself. I didn't engage. I had given them enough of my energy. My silence was my final gift. When they finally left, the house was quiet away. It had never been before. No footsteps above me. No pots clanging in the kitchen. No doors slamming or phones buzzing or fake smiles at the dinner table. Just peace. I stood in the living room and looked around. The air felt different, lighter, like the house could finally breathe again. There were still moments when the silence hurt. When I walked past the nursery and had to remind myself that not everything we build lasts, that some chapters close. Not with a bang, but with the quiet turning of a page. But I also felt something else, freedom. I went back to work. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I took long walks. Without checking my phone, I started seeing a therapist to work through everything I had been carrying inside. The betrayal didn't define me. The pain didn't break me. It stripped me down to the truth. But sometimes that's where rebuilding begins one evening. Months later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in delicate, familiar handwriting. Inside was a note from Emily. No apology, just a short paragraph. I thought I knew what I wanted, but I didn't. I hope someday you can forgive me. I folded the letter and tucked it away. Not because I forgave her, but because it was part of the story. A story I had lived, endured, and grown from. And as I stood on my porch, watching the sunset spill gold over the driveway, I realized that sometimes survival isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just